Jonathan Merryman, NASCAR expert for the Sports Buffet podcast, joined me to break down the race at Indy, and we look ahead to this weekend's race as well at Dover. Jonathan says who he thinks needs some W's, who's been running good, and more. It's Jonathan Merryman on the Sports Buffet podcast.
Always fun to have Jonathan Merryman on, one of our NASCAR experts here on the Sports Buffet podcast. And we bring Jonathan back to review what's happening in NASCAR. And I'll tell you what was happening on Sunday. Jimmie Johnson, what was happening. Man, that car was fast and never really challenged the whole day.
He was checked out. He was hooked up and ready to go, that's for sure.
Have you ever, in recent memory, just this year, I can't think of a car being that dominant from start to finish to where he led over half the miles in the race. I mean, what do you think this is just Jimmie's time to where he's starting to lock in a little bit?
I think it's Jimmie Johnson, and I also think it's Hendrick equipment. I think Junior's car at Michigan was just as hooked up. But I think it's driver, crew chief, and equipment. I think they have the perfect combination. So.
And, you mentioned Junior, and Junior may be one of the biggest beneficiaries off of sharing a garage with Jimmie Johnson. Junior now first in points, not winning a ton of races, has won one, but, hey, when you run top 5, top 10 each week, the wins are nice, but I don't know that there is, mandatory if you're running 28th one week, 14th the next. Junior's been pretty consistent.
He is, and it's paid off. He's got that number one spot in the point standings right now, too. Doesn't mean anything going into the chase if he doesn't have a couple more wins. He'll lose it, but it's going to be a confidence booster to him and his fans as well.
And, you talk a bit about the chase, and there are some guys that need some W's as we head down the stretch and get closer and closer toward that chase. And I'll tell you what, that 24 car, it'd probably be nice for him to get a W here pretty soon, at least one or two, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he still needs some help.
He needs some help. I think he can probably do it on points and consistency, but it's going to take bad luck from other drivers that don't have wins that are in the top 10, like Kevin Harvick. I think he'd have to fall out, and some other guys would have to fall out. But I think it's going to take 2 wins for him to get in there, and he can rip off 2 wins back to back if he gets on a roll. But it's not looking good for Jeff Gordon right now. I'm not giving up hope yet. But he's really got to step up and do something quick.
How much was he hurt by some of those early races to where he was either, I want to say, in the 30s at least a few times? I mean, he was towards the beginning of the year, I want to say, he was not very good.
I don't necessarily know if it's not very good or if it's just bad luck at Martinsville. Coming around on the last few laps there, he got taken out by Cliff Boyer, and if you remember, he bounced into his teammate Jimmie Johnson, and both of those were taken out, and he could have had his one win there and could be, in the chase. One race can change your momentum of how the rest of your season pans out, and it seems like ever since then, they've just been struggling and clawing for everything that they get, whether it's, a top 10 or a top 20. It feels like everything he gets is fought for. Well,
who else that you have your finger on really needs to shape up here in the last little bit before the chase to make that chase?
I think Carl Edwards definitely, Jeff Wood definitely, they need to shape up and get in there. And the driver that's in the top 10 who kind of needs to shape up and get their stuff together would be Kevin Harvick. And actually, I think RCR needs to get their stuff together. They tried some new stuff at Indy. Paul Menard was decently quick at Indy. Harvick tweeted that, they tried a lot of new things, but they're still not where they needed to be, and they were going back to the drawing board. So, Kevin Harvick as a driver can still drive, but that program really needs to get turned around, and they really need to start getting some equipment and some different setups underneath him so they can turn some top 10s into wins, possibly.
Somebody who cannot drive, though, right now is A.J. Allmendinger. He's kind of been benched by NASCAR for failing a drug test, and you and I were talking before we started the interview, if you fail a drug test, it is very hard to, you kind of have that, it's not just a black cloud, it's a thunderhead above you in terms of, you better really be on your P's and Q's for the rest of time. What do you think happens with Allmendinger?
I think he will either go to IndyCar and not worry about the road to recovery program that NASCAR has in place and has told him that he can do and be reinstated. I kind of see him going through that, and I'm not sure how his NASCAR future looks after that. But obviously he has a little bit of a tarnished spot on his name right now, and it's going to be interesting if not only an owner wants to put him in a race car after he goes through the road to recovery program, but is a sponsor going to want,
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Roger Penske's one of the top 5 names in NASCAR probably in terms of owning a car. I mean, if Penske's going to drop you, is somebody like Hendrick or RCR or Joe Gibbs really going to want to take that chance to pick you up?
Not for a cup ride. I think his best chance, and this is just my opinion, I think his best chance of dropping in NASCAR again would probably be in the lower level, and he's going to have to basically start over and work his way up. He had a golden opportunity driving the number 22 car that Kurt Busch vacated last year, and now with the whole drug thing, he's kind of forced that away. And I think the possible drug problem, because we don't know what exactly caused the positive test, but the possibility of there being a drug problem there, kind of takes away a lot of the respect that he's earned, and especially being in that seat, a really good seat in NASCAR, one of the top 5 teams. It speaks a lot on many different levels.
Final thing for you, Jonathan. Always appreciate your time, and I got to admit I have had a brain freeze and cannot remember where the race is this weekend. But who do you like?
Going to Pocono. Gibbs cars are always strong at Pocono. The way that Jimmie Johnson ran the Indy, there's a corner at Pocono that's kind of set up a little bit like Indianapolis, and you can't take anything away from the Hendrick cars. Jeff Gordon may actually get his first win this week, but I think I'm going to go with Kyle Busch.
Yeah, it was funny because I was listening to the race on the radio on this past Sunday, and they said Jimmie Johnson was like 20 car lengths ahead, and to me that's just unfathomable. And I'm thinking, what in the world have they put in that car to get him 20 car lengths and 5 seconds ahead of everybody? I mean, it was an amazing run for Jimmie. So I'm just glad they didn't find like jet fuel or anything.
Well, it's a one-group racetrack, and Hendrick is known to make horsepower in the long straightaways there at Indy. I mean, they basically have a jet engine in that thing, so
Well, we'll see what happens this weekend, and we'll talk to you again very soon, Jonathan. As always, we appreciate the time.
All right, it's been good, Bob. Thanks.